A hearty bowl of ramen is the ultimate comfort food, especially when you're on a budget. Today we're combining two of our favorite college staples and elevating them into this savory Katsu Curry Ramen bowl. All right, so first we're gonna start by preparing our katsu. Here I have two thinly sliced pork loins, and I like using pork loins just because that's how I've had katsu in the past, but if you wanted to use chicken thigh or chicken breast, you can totally do that too. But because pork loin tends to be a little bit tough, I'm gonna tenderize it with this tool and just mash it down with the teeth side. Pretty good stress reliever. I'll do this to both sides. So what tenderizing does is that once you marinate or season it, the flavors will penetrate through the insides and make it nice and juicy, succulent, and flavorful. All right, so now our meat's done. I'm gonna set this aside and then we're gonna dredge it with our breading. So our breading process comes very easily with three different components. The first one, where we'll dip the pork in, will be the flour. So this is where I like to really season it up just because it's the closest layer to the meat. So to the flour, I like adding some salt, garlic powder, and black pepper. And I'll just give it a good mix. So the next layer is gonna be our wet layer, which I'm gonna be using an egg and some water. What this does is really seal up the flavors from the flour and all the seasoning that we put in. And then it also acts as a glue that will help us stick to the breadcrumbs later. So here I have one egg, and then I'm just gonna add about 1 tablespoon of water and give it another mix. And now for our breadcrumbs, I'm using panko breadcrumbs here, which are lighter, more coarse and flaky than a typical breadcrumb that you would use for, let's say, like chicken parmigiana. These are perfect when they are fried up for a katsu because they're light, fluffy, and crispy. So now's when we start dredging everything. So I'm gonna take the pork, dip it into the flour on both sides, making sure it's all covered, and then we'll take it and dip it into our egg mixture, and finally into the panko breadcrumbs, making sure every nook and cranny is covered. It's all covered up, and we're gonna be pan frying this later, so it's gonna be nice and crispy. Now, if you wanted your katsu to be extra crispy, what you can do at this point is dip it back into the egg mixture and then back into the panko for a double layer of breading. Look how thick that coating is. It's gonna be extra crispy. So now it's time to cook up our katsu. In a frying pan, I'm just gonna add a little bit of oil, probably about 1/4 inch high, and then turn the heat on to medium high. I'm using avocado oil because it's neutral and it has a high smoking point. You can use any oil you'd like though, as long as it has a high smoking point. Once it's hot, we're gonna pan fry each side for about 3 to 4 minutes until the breading is nice and golden brown. And if you want to be sure that it's cooked, always use a meat thermometer, making sure that the internal temperature is at 145 degrees. Once the pork is done, I'm just going to transfer it over to a plate lined with a paper towel so it can absorb any excess oil. All right, so here comes the really fun part. We are going to make our Japanese curry from this golden curry box. I pretty much lived on these during college, and just the flavors of this remind me of those days when I used to just be studying for finals, doing my homework, and this was so satisfying. So it's really easy, actually. I'm not gonna be adding any of the potatoes or carrots or meat that you see here. We're gonna be using this as our ramen base. So first, in my pot on medium-high heat, I'm gonna drizzle a little bit of olive oil. Then I'm gonna add half an onion that I've already chopped up. I'll cook it for about 3 minutes until it's nice and translucent. Then we'll add in some garlic. I'll saute it for another minute, and then we're gonna add our liquid. I like using chicken bone broth just because the flavor is just a lot more richer than regular chicken broth. Plus, it has a lot more nutrients too. We're gonna add the whole thing, which is 4 cups, plus 1 cup of water. So once our broth is boiling, I'm gonna add in our blocks of Japanese curry. They kind of look like chocolate bars, except curry bars. We'll let it dissolve fully for about 5 minutes, give it another mix, and our ramen broth is done. It's perfect. All right, our broth has thickened up quite a bit because of the roux, the curry blocks here and go ahead and give it a taste to see if you want to add anything else. To me, this is perfect, but if you want to add a little bit more shoyu or soy sauce to make it a little saltier, you can totally do that. Our ramen broth is done, so I think it's time to assemble our bowl. So for our ramen noodles, you can totally use dry packaged ramen, which is totally fine. Just cook it up according to the package's direction. But since we are elevating our ramen dish here, I'm gonna be using fresh noodles. And you can find fresh noodles nowadays at any grocery stores. I got this at Whole Foods, but you can definitely find them at any Asian grocery store. And I'm just gonna cook it according to the package's direction. All right, so back to our katsu. I'm gonna use the extra crispy piece just because it's gonna be going on top of our soup. And you want it to stay kind of crispy. All right, so I'm gonna cut it into thin strips. Oh, it's perfectly cooked inside. The outer edges are nice and crispy, and you get this nice envelope of crunchy breading on the outside. So I have my noodles already in the bowl, nice and hot. And now I'm just gonna layer it with our favorite ramen toppings. So first, I'm actually gonna be adding the broth in here just because we wanna keep the toppings very clean on top of the ramen. Add enough to cover the noodles. And then I'll take a few strips of our pork katsu. And then my favorite toppings for ramen is always corn and spinach. And of course, a jammy egg. I'll put a whole egg in first and then we'll cut it open with a knife. Sprinkle in some onions. A mound right here looks good. 2 pieces of seaweed as garnish. And that is our ramen bowl. All right, let's cut up the jammy egg. I love drizzling my ramen with a little bit of chili oil right on top. Let's first try the ramen with the curry. The curry acts as a gravy clinging on to each noodle. It's thick, but not too thick, where it's too soupy. Okay. And then let's give the katsu a try. So it's been sitting on top of the broth, but as you can see, the double crispiness was able to withstand the broth. Take one more bite with the egg, get some greens in there. And that is what you call a perfect bite. Thank you so much again for watching. Let me know what you thought of this katsu curry. With this leftover pork tonkatsu, you can actually save it for the next day and eat it with rice, top it with the katsu curry, and it's absolutely delicious. Anyways, if you guys end up making this dish, I would love to see your creation, so be sure to tag me on Instagram at honeysuckle and let me know what's your favorite ramen dish. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!